Welcome, friends, and let me spin you a tale of an unlikely hero whose simple act of kindness on a cold winter's morn forever changed the course of his downtrodden life. Enjoy the story. John Goodman gripped the steering wheel of his putrid sewage truck, holding his breath against the rancid stench that had permanently saturated the vehicle's interior. Another brutal winter morning in Nowheresville, USA. The only thing worse than this dead-end job would be having no job at all in this godforsaken town. At least it kept him out of trouble, John mused, as he passed the alleyway where his old drinking buddies huddled around a barrel fire, passing a bottle of rotgut whiskey. That could have been him if he hadn't gotten his act together after his dad died. The memory still haunted him. 7-year-old Johnny sat in the back seat, playing with his Captain America action figure as his parents argued in the front. "I'm telling you, Frank, that new foreman has it in for me. If I lose my job, we'll be out on the street," his mother, Karen, fretted, lighting another cigarette with shaking hands. "Jesus, Karen, would you relax? I'll pick up some extra shifts at the factory. We'll get by, we always do," Frank reassured, reaching for her free hand. Suddenly, a massive semi-truck veered into their lane, its headlights blinding. "Frank, look out!" Karen screamed. Metal crunched and glass shattered as the vehicles collided head-on. When John regained consciousness, he was pinned under a twisted doorframe, his left leg crushed and useless. Beside him, his father lay motionless, eyes open but unseeing, blood trickling from his mouth. "Daddy! Daddy, wake up!" Johnny sobbed, struggling to reach him. But deep down, he already knew. His dad was gone forever. John shook off the painful memory as he pulled up to the modest ranch house he shared with his ma. Another day, another 75 cents. He hauled himself out of the cab, his bum leg aching fiercely in the cold, and limped inside. In the cramped kitchen, Karen Goodman cracked a few eggs into a chipped skillet, willing her arthritic hands not to tremble. Decades of scrubbing rich folks' floors had left them gnarled and sore, but they couldn't afford to turn down work. Not with Johnny's medical bills and her own failing health. She looked up as John entered, his handsome face wan and tired. Her boy had grown into a good man, but his soft heart would be the ruin of them. Irritation flared as she recalled their conversation from the night before. "You gave our last $5 to that panhandling granny again? Damn it, Johnny, when will you learn?" she snapped, slamming the skillet down harder than intended. "Aw, come on, Ma. I couldn't just leave her there in the cold," John mumbled, ducking his head. "She reminded me of Grammy Jean." Karen bit back a sharp retort. What was the use? For all her efforts, she'd raised a well-meaning but hopelessly impractical boy. He'd give a robber the shirt off his back if they said they were cold. "Just go get washed up for breakfast," she sighed. John shuffled off to the bathroom and Karen seized the rare moment of privacy to have a quick cry. Leaning over the sink, she let frustrated tears spill down her weathered cheeks. "Frank, I'm failing him," she whispered to her late husband. "Our boy's gonna end up in the poorhouse because I couldn't teach him to be hard. Damn it, I miss you." Drying her face with a ratty dish towel, Karen took a steadying breath and turned back to the stove. They'd get through this like they always did. She'd make sure of it. The next morning, John was steering his sewage truck down a deserted country road, singing tunelessly along with the radio. A corn-pone jingle for Mabel's Diner came on, advertising their world-famous 99-cent coffee. John's stomach rumbled at the thought. Maybe he'd treat himself to a cup after his shift, if he had any money left after helping out that granny yesterday. Lost in thought, he almost didn't notice the figure up ahead, frantically waving at him from the roadside. John squinted through the pre-dawn gloom. It looked like a young woman, barely dressed for the frigid weather in just a skimpy camisole and panties. What the hell was she doing out here in the middle of nowhere? He pulled over, and the girl yanked open the passenger door, piling into the cab in a whirlwind of long, coltish limbs and blonde hair. She immediately cranked the heat up to full blast, not even sparing him a glance. Miss? Are you all right?" John ventured timidly, trying to keep his eyes averted from her nearly bare chest. "Do you need me to call someone, or—" "Just drive," the girl snapped, cutting him off. She had a highbrow accent, like those snooty rich folks in the good part of town. And try to go faster than 20 miles per hour, Grandpa. John flushed, stung by her rudeness. He was only trying to help, but he bit his tongue and did as she asked, turning back onto the road. In the close confines of the cab, he could smell her expensive perfume mixing with an acrid undertone of fear sweat. Just what kind of trouble was this girl in? A mile down the road, the mystery woman abruptly pointed out the window at a gated mansion. "There, pull in there," she demanded. John eyed the overgrown hedges and rusted wrought iron dubiously. The place had clearly seen better days, like one of those old southern plantations gone to seed. Still, he did as he was told, pulling the truck to a stop by the front door. "Dad!" the girl shrieked, tumbling out of the cab and hurling herself into the arms of a disheveled older man in a tattered bathrobe. "Oh, thank God, Sarah!" the man sobbed, crushing her to his chest. "I thought I'd lost you forever when those bastards took you. Did they hurt you? If they laid a finger on you, I'm okay," Sarah interrupted, pulling back to look at him. "This man saved me," she said, turning to point at John. "I'd probably be dead in a ditch somewhere if he hadn't stopped and let me warm up in his truck." The dad rushed over to John's window, his lined face awash with gratitude. "Son, I can't thank you enough," he said fervently, pumping John's hand. "You saved my little girl's life. I'm in your debt. If there's anything I can do to repay you, name it." John shifted uncomfortably, uneasy with the effusive praise. "That's all right, sir. I was just doing what any decent person would. I'm just glad your daughter is safe." "Decent people are hard to come by these days," the man said, shaking his head. "I'm Robert Wilson, and I won't take no for an answer. You tell me how I can help you, son. Any way at all." John's mind raced. He thought of his mom, working her fingers to the bone day in and day out. He thought of the stack of bills on the kitchen table, the ones they could never seem to get ahead of, no matter how hard they scrimped and saved. Maybe this was the break they so desperately needed. He took a deep breath, met Robert's eyes, and named his price. Karen nearly dropped the casserole dish she was washing when the knock sounded at the door. Wiping her soapy hands on her apron, she went to answer it cautiously. You never knew what kind of riffraff might come calling in this part of town. She cracked the door and her jaw dropped. Standing on her sagging front porch was a dapper older gentleman in a three-piece suit, leaning on an ebony cane. What in the world? "Mrs. Goodman?" the man inquired politely, doffing his hat. "My name is Robert Wilson. I'm here about your son, John." "Johnny? What's he done now?" Karen asked warily, her mind jumping to worst-case scenarios. Had he gotten mixed up with those no-good friends of his again? Landed himself in jail? "On the contrary, Mrs. Goodman. Your son saved my daughter's life this morning," Robert said solemnly. "I've come to offer him a job as my personal driver and valet, as a token of my immense gratitude. I'll pay him triple what he makes at the sewage plant." Karen gaped at him, certain she'd misheard. A job offer? Triple John's salary? This had to be some kind of bizarre joke. She recovered enough to usher Robert inside, seating him at the rickety kitchen table. Just then, John came in from his bedroom, stopping short at the sight of their unusual guest. "Mr. Wilson, what are you doing here?" he asked, glancing between Robert and his dumbfounded mother. Robert stood, clasping John's shoulder. "Son, I meant what I said about repaying you. I want you to come work for me, effective immediately. You'll be our private chauffeur and valet. The salary is non-negotiable. I insist on compensating you properly for your heroism and kindness." John blinked rapidly, trying to process this twist of fortune. He loved his mom more than anything, but the idea of leaving his dead-end job for this opportunity of a lifetime was beyond tempting. Still, he hesitated, looking to Karen for guidance. She understood his reticence. Pulling him aside, she whispered fiercely in his ear, "Johnny Goodman, if you don't accept this offer, I swear I'll tan your hide 6 ways to Sunday. This is our chance to finally make something of ourselves. Say yes before the man changes his mind." John met his mother's pleading gaze and knew she was right. He had to think of their future. Turning back to Robert, he extended his hand. "Mr. Wilson, I accept. When do I start?" 1 year later. John straightened his impeccable black silk tie, hardly able to believe the Natalie-dressed man in the mirror was really him. Long gone were the days of grime-streaked coveralls and grease-stained fingers. Now he looked every inch the professional valet in his pressed suit and shiny loafers. Amazing what a year of working for the Wilsons had done for him. More than his appearance had changed. John stood taller these days, his shoulders no longer stooped under the weight of poverty and hopelessness. His smiles, though still kind, were tinged with a newfound confidence. For the first time in his 24 years, he could see a real future for himself and his ma, free of the constant struggle to keep their heads above water. A soft cough interrupted his musings. Ahem. John, are you ready to go? Sarah Wilson stood in the doorway, a vision in her sapphire cocktail dress and opera gloves. John turned to her and smiled. Of course, Miss Sarah. Let me just grab my hat. He didn't miss the way her eyes roved appreciatively over his form, or the coy smile playing at her glossy lips. They'd grown close over the past year, with all the time spent together on Sarah's endless social calls and trips into the city. John would have to be blind not to notice the younger woman's beauty and charm. But he was too professional to ever dream of acting on the spark of attraction between them. The Wilsons were his employers, his benefactors. He owed them everything. Falling for their daughter would be an unforgivable breach of trust. Shall we? He said brightly, gesturing for Sarah to precede him out to the sleek Rolls-Royce idling in the drive. He held the door for her, breathing in her heady jasmine perfume as she brushed past him to settle in the supple leather seat. As John slid behind the wheel and pulled smoothly down the long, oak-lined lane, he marveled at the twists of fate that had brought him here. To think, just one act of compassion on a bitter winter morning had changed the course of his entire life. He shook his head, amazed and humbled. Catching Sarah's eye in the rearview mirror, he shared a small, secret smile with her. Whatever the future held, he had a feeling it would be extraordinary. And it was all thanks to his mama, for raising him to be an unlikely hero.